Hi.
Can you hear me?
Where's the pasta?
Say something.
Hey,
You want to that?
Again?
can you hear me now?
That should be working, so I'm just putting it up. So, obviously, I'm not off the show, Alvinson, he's in Hickory today and tomorrow. So he's gonna do it via Zoom. Obviously, if you don't have class right before, you can stay home if that fits your schedule better tomorrow. But if you have class right before, since I saw some of you have that, you can stay in the classroom, okay? So,
It's the day before your birthday.
David,
Yes,
can you hear us?
yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Um,
Okay.
I'm gonna lower it a tad bit.
That's mine.
So
That's
while
not-
we go through this for the next day or two, I promise I'll be as both explicit and brief at the same time. These will be recorded so that you'll be over. Thank you, Pia. Appreciate it. So without further ado, we're going to finish on the marketing plan, and we will move on to chapter 3 tomorrow. So it's important for us to understand that the marketing plan is actually made up of multiple modules and separate items that come together to form the plan. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about each one of these one at a time, and each one of them has a valued contribution. And so there are things that you will be obligated for or required for when you develop the marketing plans for your particular studies. Just things before we go over and talk about the particulars. There's some guidelines that you need to know about the marketing plan. The first is that it's going to be comprehensive. Now, it doesn't mean that every element is part of the marketing plan, but every element just about is considered, whether or not it's actually present in the plan itself. It needs to be flexible enough because, of course, every corporation or a company's issues are different from everyone else's. But it also needs to be able to be reviewed again and again and be modified as required. By consistent, what the consistency means is that the marketing plan is consistent with all of the other planning aspects of your particular organization. And so the marketing plan would fit neatly in every other piece of correspondence that would work within your organization. And so that's what the consistency means. And the last is logic. And what this, the reason it has to be logic is, and I'll repeat this again, is you're selling the plan, all right? It needs to be logical so that it sells itself to the top managers. An illogical outline with unreasonable kinds of expectations, unfortunately, are not going to be valued by the individuals who would need them most. And so these are the things to consider when you're developing a successful marketing plan. So let's look at the pieces of the marketing plan itself. Now, the executive summary is kind of one of those interesting pieces. If there's going to be anything that the top management reads, it's going to be the executive summary. The executive summary is a synopsis of the overall marketing plan. It tends to be terse in its writing. In other words, it's concise without too much prevarication. In other words, it states in a parsimonious way the purposes and expectations of what the plan is. It's not a deep drill analysis. It goes over the major aspects and the breadth of the plan, but realize this is that it's an outline of the main thrust, okay? It gives the readers an understanding, and the other part of that is just realize it helps the top executives know where the direction you're going. Think of it as like an abstract. If you were reading a journal article, this is what the executive summary is. Now, this is that one piece of paper that a CEO would read and wouldn't read anything else. So it's got to work, okay? You're going to sell the plan in the executive summary. And one last important thing, and this is important for you to understand, the executive summary is written last. It isn't written first. It is, in essence, a bringing together of all of the valued information that you need in order to give you the most detailed overview of that you possibly could. Now, just as I said, it's not deep drill, it's an outline, it's synopsis. It's extremely important, but it all has to be in a very concise, terse statement. Okay, so that's the executive summary. It's the start. The situation analysis will be the most detailed of all of the things that you write. The executive summary contains all of the pertinent information for three key environments: the internal environment, which has to do with your own personal strengths and weaknesses, such as capacity of technology, your financial resources, the internal strife within the organizations, and your firm's current objectives and performance. The next is the outside environment pertaining to your customers. What are the needs of your target market? How are those needs changing? And how these current or new products meet those needs? And then the external environment, which is the major part, which is the competitive, the economic, the social, political, and technological environment out there. It basically puts together all of the marketing objectives have to be within this particular environment. And that's important for you to be able to understand these three environments. The objectives, the goals of your organization have to fit within the world as we know it now. It must be comprehensive and focused on the key elements. Otherwise, there's a danger of being overwhelmed. Quite simply, especially with data analytics, there's a probability that there's just too much information. And the situation analysis, as detailed as it is, ultimately is actually more of a paring down of information rather than every single possible permutation that you could have, all right? And so the marketing plan starts with the situation analysis, it starts with the executive summary, then moves to the detail of the situation analysis, and then we move to that immortal SWOT analysis. So the SWOT analysis actually was developed by Stanford in the 1960s. The SWOT analysis, quite simply, as you can see, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The strengths and weaknesses are internal. The opportunities and threats are external. The strengths and weaknesses are micro in nature. The opportunities and threats are macro in nature. Strengths and weaknesses are unique to the firm that's conducting the analysis, in case you want to know whether it's a strength or weakness. The opportunities and threats are external issues that exist independent of the firm itself. And so that's how you tell one versus the other. The worst difficulty that most individuals have is the inability to separate the strengths and the weaknesses from the opportunities and threats. Just remember this, whatever issue is under your control, that is a strength or a weakness. If I can control those situations, then they're either a strength or a weakness. If I have no control over them, especially environmental issues, then that is an opportunity or is it a threat? To develop a strategic focus, the most successful thing you can do is match the firm's strength with the opportunities. And so when I'm back in class, I believe I'll be there on Wednesday. One of the things we're going to talk about is we're going to go through a sample of this where you have the possibility of matching a strength with an opportunity. The reason that there's two reasons to do a SWOT analysis. One, it's useful. It's a very useful tool for getting a snapshot, this moment of time and understanding all of the pertinent information involved. It's a very useful tool, all right? The second is it helps you to develop a compelling reason for your consumers to buy your product. Because if you're looking at your particular strengths and you can magnify them and you can minimize your weaknesses, then that is a step forward in the consumers desiring your particular product. So you're going to be doing SWOTs over and over again. As I said, they're useful, and we will start practicing those in the next couple of days. So the situation analysis, the SWOT analysis, ultimately what they hope to help you do is create what are known as goals and objectives. And we've gone over these a couple of times, and it won't hurt for us to go over them again. So what is a goal? A goal is a very simple, broad statement of what you desire to have accomplished. The goals also can be specific to personnel to give them a focus and a reason for their purpose. It is a guide to creating the objectives and allocating resources ultimately that are the execution functions of the 4 Ps. And so what is an objective? As I've stated before, it is a quantitative expectation of performance. This quantitative expectation is our way of determining whether we have success or lack thereof. It defines the measurement targets for evaluation, and it also provides an idea of success or failure. Which leads us to the marketing strategy. What is the thing that we do better than our competition? Hopefully, in the marketing strategy developed through the previous steps, we come up with actionable steps that we can perform, that we do things better than their competition. I was just looking at Walmart, and Walmart has a 90-day, no question asked return strategy. That is an executable strategy that they have that basically states, other than software or clothes, they will accept anything returned 90 days, no question asked. That is an example of channels, reverse channels, actually. In selecting and identifying your target market, providing them with value, ultimately, that's how you go about creating and sustaining a competitive advantage, one that is not easily copied by any others. And so that is an example of marketing strategy. Marketing strategy by Dollar General, by example, is that they're going to have 85% of the things that you can find inside of a Walmart, but they're going to be doing it in a much more convenient fashion. That is an example of place and their implementation of their strategy as well. And so this is how you move from the situation analysis to the SWOT analysis to the strategy, and ultimately how you implement it and how you go about achieving your goals. And so what are the steps in implementation? Just remember this, is that the implementation phase is just as important as the strategic phase, because otherwise, if you're not performing as you should, you're failing to create or achieve your strategy. And so in implementation, the questions you ask, what are the activities to be undertaken? And so in Walmart's instances, they're going to create a reverse channel distribution strategy to make it consumers easier for them to do returns. How will the activities be performed? Will they be performed online, or will they be done in-house? When will the activities be performed, and who is responsible for those activities? It's also important to understand when you're talking about objectives, objectives are for individuals as much for corporations as well. They explicitly detail what is the purpose of employees and how they go about executing their particular jobs that are consistent with the strategy. How will the completion be monitored? And then how much will these activities cost? All of these things are valued and essential to know whether or not you're going to succeed or not. The last in this part is evaluation and control. We have to establish performance standards. What is success? How do we know whether we've achieved it or not? We have to know how to measure actual performance against the standards, because ultimately we need to know whether we've achieved success. Now, the most likely ones you're going to have is some financial assessment of the plan. And generally those are tied to costs or sales or revenues. Why do you want? Because otherwise you simply don't know whether you're achieving your goals and attaining them, especially financially, or not. And so evaluation and control is valued, important, and without, you simply don't know whether you've achieved some successes or not. So the last thing I'm going to talk about today, oh no, excuse me, two more things, I'm sorry, is how do we go about using the structure? I mean, what is the most valued way that we can use the structure to attain our goals? The first thing we need to do is plan ahead. We need to spend a lot of time, especially we have to recognize that the situation analysis is going to be the most detailed thing you do. It's going to take an enormous amount of time and effort to do that. And so you need to be prepared for that above all things. Realize that creativity is important, that effort is essential in order to be able to achieve some success. That certain amount of out-of-the-box thinking is got to be done. In terms of revising and revising again, my suggestion is that you treat it like fine wine. You let it age for a while. So you come up with a detailed plan, you put it away, you review it again in the light of a fresh vision, and you might find yourself with a new way of looking at it and understanding it. Look at it in common sense. And by that is, you have to weigh all of the information with judgment and accuracy. It has to exist in the real world and be able to make common sense kinds of evaluations based upon the data that you have, not from wishful thinking. The implementation must be realistic. It must be doable. You have to be able to have judgments, and you have to have evaluations that you can write down. Otherwise, you're simply going to be unsure when or whether or not you've achieved success. And just remember that most good organizations reevaluate quarterly. And so what that means is that by evaluating every quarter, what you do is you have a 1-year planning window coming up every year, and that's very valuable. All right. The last thing is that you need to be able to communicate with top middle managers and explain the need for the resources, which is the most important thing that a marketing plan is there for. It is a sales piece. You are selling to the upper management what you believe ultimately would be the best future. The last important thing to understand in this section is that research tells us that organizations that develop formal plans have improved financial performance. All of the research tells us that if you work with a plan, that you are much more likely to achieve financial success than if you're simply trying to go along and make do as things happen. Okay? Okay. So 2 more things before we go. One of them talking about is crisis management. And I don't think we have to go through anything that we've seen in the last 3 years to know what crisis management means. It's the process of handling something that's very high impact, that is characterized by uncertainty and ambiguity. It requires a very quick response. It's impossible to be perfect because of the chaos involved, but it is absolutely essential for future success that management shows that you are dealing with the situations in the best way you can. They can be elements of success as well as failure. They may disrupt plans, but they may be the roadmap to success. I don't know if you know this, just to go on things, but more corporations are formed during recessions than they are during recoveries. Recessions have a way of focusing the mind in no way like any other. And crisis is another way that those things kind of happened. I spoke about that 2 days ago when I was talking about this Tylenol scare. And then I also talked about Perrier water as well. Crisis management needs to be managed. It can't be ignored. And so even with the disruptions, you have to be able to plan for a future. We don't have one. And so this is the concept of crisis management. And that also is consistent with the concept of continuity planning. Continuity planning refers to all of those strategies and procedures that help ensure that everything is in place and operating. This includes planning for disasters. When I worked for a bank, I formed what they used to be called disaster recovery. Now it's called business continuation plan. The disaster recovery plan basically stated what is the roadmap when everything else goes wrong. It also set off what were a series of, let me just say, trigger events. And so in other words, when particular events occurred, there was no need to sit and meet to plan things because the plans had already been made based upon triggers, such as a natural disaster. And that's what a continuity plan or contingency plan should do, is it should anticipate those things and have triggers set so that when things go south, there's a way of turning them around. And so that's continuity planning. So let's wrap this up. The significance and purpose of the marketing plan. The marketing plan explains both the present and the future. It is a snapshot of where you are at time. And in the present, that snapshot is the situation analysis and the SWOT. It specifies hopefully what the expected outcomes are, the goals and objectives. It describes the actions and responsibilities for individuals that are within the organization. It identifies the resources that need to come into play in order to implement the strategy. And then finally, how do we go about monitoring so that we know whether or not we've achieved success or not? Okay, I know we're swimming through this super fast and I apologize for that, but we are finished with chapter 2 right now. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off, and tomorrow we will start chapter 3. And if you need anything, please email me, and I hope you all have a pleasant day. Thank you.